Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. My name is Jordan, and today we have two guests, a wonderful Paul and Anita Day. And Paul and Anita are from VueGarden in West Gippsland. And if you haven't come across them, I'm so pleased to be able to introduce them to you today. I think what really strikes me about Paul and Anita's journey is that it feels really authentic. It feels like a journey of learning and being able to share passion and share experiences. Something that they'll talk about today is how they ran this beautiful off-grid Airbnb, traditional air bed and breakfast, or bed and breakfast, not necessarily Airbnb, but this traditional experience where people can come and get to know what it's like living off grid in a very modern and beautiful way, and also connecting with the land and connecting with the garden and sharing the passion about the things that Paul and Anita are so into. It really sparked a lot of my passion as well, as so many of these conversations tend to do, around soil biology and soil health, because Paul has really dived down this avenue of working out compost teas, his learnings from people like Dr. Elaine Ingham that he talked about, and just how he's then dissecting some of the complexities that come with this into a nice and simple way for us to be able to take home, and how he's then sharing that at workshops and garden talks and things like this. So a really genuine and fun conversation for me today, and I have no doubt that you're going to get so much value out of this as well. So without further ado, here are the incredible Paul and Anita Day.
Well, at the moment, we're maintaining quite a large garden. So there's half acre of garden, and there, an orchard of fruit trees, large vegetable gardens. We have a large greenhouse,
Oh, wow.
lots and lots of flowers, and so that takes up most of our time. But the property is divided up into we're 36 acres, but 30 of the property is set aside for wildlife.
Hmm.
So the only thing that goes on there is we'll source wood for our hydronic heating system, and also we cook by wood stove most of the winter. At the moment, no, but so that's basically what goes on in there: wildlife and harvesting of timber. We also keep 2 acres purely in the summer months for butterflies, insects, and grasshoppers, so that they can feed and breed on native grasses it's slowly coming over. Because that's slowly naturalizing now, because it was just a pasture paddock, and we
Wow.
don't keep animals. So
Mhm.
so we turned over that, and presently, yeah, just concentrating on a garden, and we've got garden tours coming up later on in the year. And normally this time of the year, we've been involved in a large festival called Creative Harvest, which is
Okay.
showcases about 12 different food gardens across West Gippsland and South Gippsland. So we would have just come through that, but they didn't do gardens this year. They were just doing workshops, which we weren't
Hmm.
involved with. But this year, moving along, there'll be garden tours, and of course, Paul will be as part of a garden tour. He does the composting and the aerobic compost tea workshops. So
Yeah,
that's sort of basically what's happening at the moment.
that's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to dive into that with you, Paul, in a bit. We might start because I want to understand this garden because this is I discovered your View Garden. Is that how you pronounce it? View Garden? On Instagram actually. And what can I understand about the garden? How long has it been there? And what sort of things are you growing in there? I love the idea of the wild spaces that you've got on the property and bringing all the insects in. That's absolutely fabulous. But tell me about the garden itself. What sort of things are you growing or trying to grow or showcase in that garden? And I presume that's changed over the years as well.
Yeah, it has. The garden has changed over its development. It's about 16 years, I think, coming up. We're
Wow.
coming up to 16 years. It was after Black Saturday,
Oh,
which the
really?
anniversary has just been. We weren't affected by the fires, but very close by, only 2 kilometres up the road, they were affected. So the
Goodness.
garden started 16 years ago in the winter, and like a lot of people who start out with gardening, we just seem to go roll from one disaster to another disaster. We didn't understand that, in our forest, we just thought that there were wallabies and kangaroos and things were living in there, but we didn't realise that Skippy lived there. Peter Rabbit also lives in the forest. Who else lives there?
Bambi.
Bambi lives in the forest. And we'd come up here on the weekend because we were still living in Bayside, Melbourne at the time. And we'd plant out all these trees and have everything looking wonderful. And we'd just get invaded, of course,
Mm.
and come back the following weekend and there'd be nothing here.
Oh my goodness.
So we had to do something about that. It was costing us a fortune in plants
I'm
and
sure.
and heartache. So I think about it'd have to be about 8 years ago we invested in electric fencing. So
Hmm.
we had to do that. So that we made that decision that we're giving the wildlife 32, 34 acres of our 36 for them, and
Yeah.
all we wanted was just this half acre and us. So after that, things really started to flourish. But
Brilliant.
you now in the garden, what you would like to know is what we're growing at the moment.
Yes.
So we have a lot of sort of I'd say unusual plants. We're very inspired by a nursery that's very close to us. It specialises in unusual and rare plants. So we've had a go at doing different things there with trees and shrubs. But I love lots of flowers,
Mm.
so I grow a lot of in the summer. I grow lots of dahlias, but we're just finding now with how the garden has evolved and with climate change now, we just don't have the water to maintain water guzzling dahlias. So as things are dying, which they are, we're just replacing them with uh, salvias. I've got quite an obsession with them, and of course the birds adore them.
Yeah.
So that's the flower side of it. Um, and what else are we enjoying out there?
Well, as you say, that's the flower side, and then we have the vegetable growing side of things, where we,
Hmm.
we take that organic approach to growing vegetables, and we always have through our early life, and um, take that real sort of natural approach to it. And we also, when we retired about 5 years ago, we treated ourselves to a greenhouse,
Very
and
nice.
that our growing season. We're at 300 metres above sea level here, so we do get frost,
Hmm.
and it is cooler than the Melbourne temperatures. But Anita can start the vegetables off earlier,
Yeah.
and we can finish later when we've got capsicums and eggplants and things like that.
Mm.
So we get quite a buzz out of picking for lunch a range of vegetables, and it's the usual stuff: carrots and beetroot and beans and potatoes and leeks and all the sort of range of vegetables and vine fruits, blackberries
Wow.
and raspberries, um, make up our garden or our vegetable side of things.
Yeah.
That sounds very productive. It sounds like you've got a lot going on. But I think you touched on it by saying that, well, for a couple of things. One is obviously having this flourishing garden of vegetables in the middle of somewhere where all the wildlife are trying to find food. You've sort of placed this this wonderful buffet in front of them. So no doubt they were heading in to come and get some of that. So I totally understand the fencing side of things. And then getting to know the climate happens like over certain years, and you get to recognize certain patterns that happen in the area, but things you know do seem to be shifting, and seasons seem to be moving and being later in the season, or unexpected temperatures and all sorts of different things going on.
Mm.
Um, you mentioned that before you moved out to this property, you were living maybe by the coast, I think, if I heard you correctly. What were you growing out there? Was it possible to grow out there? And what was the learning curve like moving out to Gippsland? Because I know quite a few people that are out sort of in that area, and some say it has been a bit of a transition, and others maybe not so much. But what'd you find?
It, um, it, it's the scale of what we did. We went originally from a very little house in Footscray. So we were right in a, and I think I told you as part of our story. It's just, in the early years, the very early years of living in this little house. Um, I was inspired by a magazine,
Mm, that's right.
and that was in the years before the internet and streaming services on TV and YouTube. People actually went to the library to get their information, and I was I was pregnant at the time, and I had to give up work, and I was extremely bored. And so I'd make constant trips to the library. And I found this periodical there called Earth Garden in
Mm.
1986. I don't know if you've heard of it, Jordan. I think everybody who's gone back to the land has heard of, has heard of Earth Garden. So I read every Earth Garden that the library had. And I
Wow.
think the librarian probably got a bit tired of me. And she then sent me to another section in the library and said, look, there's this other magazine called Grassroots. And again, Grassroots has only just finished. They only finished up
Wow.
a couple of months ago, which is really sad. So we're talking about magazines that went on for about 40 years. So we've journeyed with these magazines.
Yeah.
And so everything was just in the beginning, all trial. I was just at home with a little baby, and I was trying out sort of homesteading skills in a suburban house, and doing little things with the garden. So in Footscray, getting back to how the
Mm.
climate at that time. So in Footscray, you'd get heavy frosts
Yeah, okay.
in the winter time, but still just little tiny things. I'd have little box of this or a little section of there, and it was all just small. But as time went on and we moved to Bayside, Melbourne, down on the coast. We then had a much bigger garden. We had a lovely big garden when we moved.
When big, relatively speaking, it's,
Yeah.
you're talking tens of square meters of just garden and
Great.
things. But where we lived in Bayside, I think we were the only people to have a chook run in the whole
Oh,
suburb.
nice.
And Anita was growing vegetables and things, and the local school would bring the primary kids up and
Oh,
to have a
wow.
look at chooks and vegetables, and we were always composting.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as well as I can compost now,
Yeah.
but we've always had that organic approach and used the chooks to rummage through the vegetables and things like that. So we had that. We always had that approach.
We also had
And
an allotment thing too.
yes,
We,
we
we
did in the
Wow.
next suburb. There was a little allotment. So we've always were trying to grow more. And then when we had the opportunity we had our property here in West Gippsland without a house and whatnot, but after Black Saturday we built and developed. We just bought and upscaled what we were doing and our passion in the suburbs out into
mm,
the country. So it was an easy transition for us. We
Yep.
always knew we were going to grow and have a lovely garden and try and grow fruit and veg as
That's
well.
such
We
a, yeah. Sorry, I was going to say that's
yeah.
really nice because it's often the dream of many when you start a small garden, especially in the suburbs, like I have as well. And it's often the dream of many to go and connect with more land and to try and sort of spread out your roots a little bit and to take
Mm.
that a little step further. But it's also proving that it can be done. And I think that now we're starting to see a lot more people who are taking up these sorts of gardening approaches, permaculture systems, and trying
Mm.
to close the loop within their own properties, which is really nice, and schools, interestingly enough, which is great. But it's so nice that you're able to start that little bit of inspiration for some of them and be, that sort of cornerstone property that everyone recognizes. Because like even yesterday, because we have a public bus stop out the front of our house on the other side of the fence, and there was these a couple of little pairs of eyes looking through at my chooks and the garden yesterday when I was watering, and the little boy said, "Oh, I love your garden. I love your animals and stuff." So I thought it's just
Oh,
so nice to bring that joy to the public, even if it's just, someone walking past, you get to connect with them, or someone just sort of saying g'day and appreciating your garden. Um, so now let's move on a little bit because then once you've got this
mm,
property, you started to run some Airbnbs on the property and start to develop it as a little bit of a place where people could come out and stay and enjoy the countryside and things like this. Um, Talk to me about the journey with that and how I guess did that run side by side with the gardening?
mm. So we ran what was known as View at Gindavik, Eco B&B. We ran that for 9 years, and it was a traditional bed and breakfast, Jordan, whereby people can, if you've done any sort of that style of accommodation,
Hmm.
travelling, usually in the UK and
Yep.
Scotland, Wales, Ireland, whereby people come and stay in your home.
Hmm.
They lovely separate accommodation, but in the morning they would come out and have breakfast, and sometimes there'd be people on the other side in the accommodation, and they'd all sit round the table together, and it was terrific because they would share experiences about what they'd done and where they ate and all of that. But what it gave people an idea of is what it was like to live in a contemporary off-grid home. I think a lot of people have this notion about off-grid that it's all just sort of mud brick and it's in a tin shed and everybody's wearing hemp. It's ours is a very modern home with the best eco efficient heating and windows. And so it gave people an idea of what that was like. Also, to
Cool.
the garden was very much a part of people's stay because in the early years, I used to cook evening meals because out in Gindavik, there is nothing. There
Mm.
is, and you have to hop in your car to go anywhere. And of course, going out in cars in the winter didn't suit people. So I would
Yeah.
cook for the guests, and
Wow.
it would be just all seasonal. So it would be what was growing in the garden and what I could source from local suppliers. So it
Yeah.
gave people an idea of living in the season, eating in the season, producing all our food for the table, all their bread, their jams, you name it,
Wow.
muesli. We grew all the oranges for the orange juice, and so we did that for 9 years. And we actually, it's one of these. It's been one of these situations where people came and they stayed with us, and then they came back and they repeated
Oh,
their visit. And a lot of these people have become friends of ours.
that's
So
beautiful.
but what happens is that everything comes to a natural end,
Hmm.
and COVID really put that was the thing that closed it.
Yeah.
And then we just decided then we really wanted to get in. Paul had finally retired from work, and we wanted to get into travel and developing what we were doing here, and that's
Yeah.
that's what we did.
It's
Yeah.
a nice, as you say, it's a nice, like, even though it may have been your hand forced, it sort of works out in the end for what a chapter closes, another opens. Um, that experience sounds incredible. I think having done a few of those in, England, Scotland, things like this, where you'd have that traditional bed and breakfast, you get to immerse yourself in the experience, but as you say, connect with the host as well that lives there and have share breakfast and stories. I mean, as a kid, it was, I think, quite pivotal for me to be able to see all these different ways of living, which was really nice, and especially in the countryside. So
Mm.
that experience, sharing the stories and meeting all of these people and getting them to connect with the garden, I've no doubt that that's why, you remain friends with a lot of people because it really, you do get to connect on a different level and they get to see what's possible and experience something they might not have experienced anywhere else. Um, do you mind? I just want to, I'm curious about your home and the setup that you had. Paul, was that your involvement as an engineer being involved in setting up the self-sufficiency of the house, the off-grid nature of it? Can you talk a little bit about, just without going into too much detail, just some of the systems that you'd set up that make it different from a whole bunch of people in hemp?
Yeah. The very first thing is positioning on the block for solar efficiency. And we
Yes.
face north, which just also coincides with a fabulous view out over to Mount Baw. But by positioning for the sun correctly, everything else fell into place. Then we used an architect to help us to make a very energy efficient home,
Hmm.
double glazing, composite windows. Because we're in the forest and we have natural timber fall, hydronic heating for winter with a fireplace, and
Yep.
as Anita mentioned before, wood stove. And then hot water in summer is via solar panels on the roof with a storage tank.
Yep.
That is boosted. Our only source is gas bottles to boost that hot water occasionally
Yep.
in winter. And our electricity supply is a 4.8 kilowatt solar system, which was big at the time,
Hmm.
15 years ago, for an off grid system. It's not now
Right.
and whatnot, but that gave us all the needs. And you can see up here,
Hmm.
that's a very big air conditioner that
Mm.
runs without consuming electricity. There's enough solar energy coming through the panels to run that on
Wow.
all the hot days. And of course, we don't pay anything for it.
Yeah, beautiful.
In winter, we do have a backup diesel generator that occasionally, when you have in Jindervik the foggy and the wet days for 3 or 4 days in a row, you do have to run the generator to top up.
Hmm.
And and we've got lovely verandas with coverings and things like that. That by 11 o'clock they're in the shade, and we
Beautiful.
can enjoy this and the views and things either inside or outside. So that's a little bit about
Mm.
the design. All natural products, earth bricks here,
Yep.
um, and Anita's design and how we want it to look. One big open space is our main living area. That's the
Hmm.
dining room, lounge room, and kitchen all together, and the bedroom that we occupy behind us with a boot room slash laundry
Hmm.
and two pods that we can guests and family now use.
Beautiful.
So all up about 220 square metres of living space, but 50 of that is an undercover veranda. So a relatively
Wow.
small home, but
Mm.
there's only two of us,
Yeah.
and it does everything, and it serves a lot. And we're open to the forest on two sides. So
That's incredible.
fantastic.
I think is
So
that
that's a
something that you planned for? Like this is that you knew exactly that this is the type of thing that you wanted to build was an eco house and self-sufficient. Is that the whole plan originally?
once the quotes came in for the getting just the electricity to the edge of the block, and then you still had to bring it to the house,
Hmm.
we said it was far more efficient to go the other way. The house design was always going to be solar efficient, so it wasn't too much to add a solar power, a generation system
Hmm.
onto the house. Water tanks were already coming. We were already going to use solar panels for hot water heating and with gas boosting. So
Perfect.
it sort of naturally progressed that way
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, it's the smart thing to do. You want to be fully set up, and then you've got to have backups because you're not connected to anything. You've got to, you know, go through a lot of these scenarios and figure out if the power goes completely, if we've got, terrible weather for a few days, or if, God forbid, you've got fires coming through again. You need to be prepared in many different ways. Um, that's really interesting. Thank you for touching on that. Let's go back to the garden now, moving into sort of what you're doing now, because from what I understand that you've have had or you are having people come in for workshops and teaching through various different things. Obviously, this now branches into the compost and the aerobic compost teas, things like this. So, what sparked the move from from the, obviously you had this beautiful Airbnb, you'd started all these practices already, and you were sort of getting involved in this. What was the next step like to go, okay, let's start inviting people in and teaching some of this stuff? What was the thought process behind that and the journey for that one?
That 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 came basically came with the festivals that we would be
Yes.
involved with. So with Creative Harvest, um, they were interested in, well, why are we growing such terrific food, or
Yeah.
how come you haven't got a lot of bugs on your food or on your plants, and all of that. And that just naturally evolved. And next
Mm.
thing you know, Paul is giving informal talks. Then it started getting a little bit more organized,
Mhm.
and groups would come in. But basically that evolved from 3 years ago. We made a decision that we weren't going to buy any more organic fertilizers,
Mhm.
as in things like things like Power Feed and Sea Sol, and
Dynamic
all
lifter.
Dynamic Lift. We were looking at some great YouTube about how other people were, approaching their growing and their composting, and all of that. And we just started to get inspired by what other folks were doing. And so we just said, we're going to go cold turkey.
Yeah.
We're not going to buy another thing.
Mm.
We're going to make all our own products. And that's the path that Paul went down then.
And
Yeah.
at about the same time, with our memberships through Landcare, we attended a few events, workshops, and meetings at town halls. And I struck a soil scientist who lives locally, Dr. Mary Cole.
Mhm.
And she changed or took us to the next step. We were always composting and going the organic approach, but she really gave me the mantra of feed the soil, not the plants.
Mhm.
And it just coincided with some other people that were making compost tea. And then I attended a workshop at Dr. Mary Cole's farm, and that sort of really kicked it all off so that we got the confidence to, as Anita said, we gave away the commercial products and
Mhm.
we just said, let's go all in, trying to do it with just the products that we can either supply or neighbours we can take off the land with neighbours' permission,
Yeah.
and go from there. And that's the stage where we're at now. But there's three mantras that we follow, and that they are: feed the soil, not the plant; biology before chemistry. So get your microbiology right before you worry about fertilizers and NPKs. And the third one is 100% cover 100% of the time. If you've
Mm.
got living roots and biology, something will happen and grow. So we've tried to apply those three mantras to our growing systems, both the vegetables and the flower and our orchard as well.
That sounds perfect. Honestly, though, I feel like that was very similar for me. Once the unlock was there about the soil and changing my perspective from it being this, a medium to that you would just put your plants in, the focus, and it's still I mean, it's moving in the direction, but still the general public, which of I was one of them at the time, was I was thinking focusing on the plant, but depends on what the plant is. What does the plant need? Blah, blah, blah. But then when someone explained to me the process of nutrient cycling and the way that having the biology in the soil is what makes the food available for the plants, then I was thinking, oh, we're not growing plants, we're growing soil. And that's the same, exactly what you said, that mantra there. And those three mantras are so very much what I would live by as well. And I like the simplicity that you've got there, the, biology before the chemistry, because it does unlock everything for you in the garden. And it seems to mitigate so many of the problems that people are finding with moisture levels, watering, with pests and disease, with the nutrients availability and all of this kind of thing. So, Paul, tell me then, once you got that bit of inspiration, how did you like I'm interested in the story, the journey with the microscopy, understanding the biology, and then getting to a point of really honing in on things like the compost tea and the jadam and those techniques. What was your journey like and through all of this?
The Well, we came from a base of managing to make good compost through YouTube clips and things like that. So we had that, and then we started a worm farm in an old metal bathtub, and that's been
Beautiful.
going about 5 years now to give us a source of worm wee and worm castings. But with the discovery of about feeding the soils and attending the workshop with Dr. Mary Cole, in that workshop, and she has a very good friend and another compatriot American who's just retired is Dr. Elaine Ingham.
Mm-hmm.
And she is the doyen of soil health in America since the 1970s or
She is.
earlier, I think.
Mm.
And I followed both YouTube clips, but also some articles both had co-written or had commented on from each other, and that gave me some recipes for compost tea.
Mhm.
And I made my very first batch of compost tea, and I thought, well, how do I check this? Because how do you know to put it out when you've got the bugs? So I bit the bullet and took it off for analysis. And Mary Cole gave me a very good mark. So,
Oh,
so on my
brilliant.
first batch, I thought this was just following her directions and what to do. It wasn't complex.
Mm.
It's just having everything that you needed there together to make the brew, and then we were off. So once I did the tea, I said, well, I'm the engineer side of me about this is about measurement. So how do you know?
Hey guys, really quickly, jumping in, I just want to remind you, if you are not subscribed to this show, that is the number one thing that you can do to show me your support. So if you're finding value from this conversation and you're deeply engaged, I would love you to hit the follow or subscribe button. All right, back to the show.
One is measuring the biology with the microscope, which I've learned from Dr. Mary Cole's course. I do have a refractometer, and I measure bricks quite often on various bits and pieces. And it's so simple; it almost is a kitchen utensil. We're
Yeah.
crushing something, looking at it. And the third one is just the permaculture principle or guideline of observation.
Mm.
Use your own, how do the plants look? Do they look healthy? Is there many bugs? What did they look like last year?
Mm.
Your soil, dig it up, squeeze it, and just that. Oh, it's not holding moisture. Maybe I need a little bit more of something, or and just by those three observations and measurements, if you like,
Mm.
just keep working at it and tweaking things. So we did the compost teas and we were putting those out, and then I came across a book, and you've got to remember compost teas an aerobic
Mm-hmm.
process
Yeah.
and not anaerobic.
Mm.
But then I discovered weed teas, which form more of an anaerobic process, in jadam, which is a Korean process.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work out how these two things can work together, because the bacteria are different. But as you discover when you get into the science of these things, it's very, very complex. You have bacteria that can live in both or survive in both. They may not thrive and whatnot. So I started to make some teas as our means of fertilizer. We could add the biology with the compost tea,
Yeah.
and then we would make these weed teas, if you like. But our predominant weed, if you like, is comfrey. We
Yes.
grow lots of comfrey and we chop and put it in 20-litre drums.
Yep.
And the big tip is use unchlorinated water for
Mm.
any of these products you make. Rainwater, we're off grid, so we don't worry about it. The
Yep.
town people need to let it stir it and let it sit for 24 hours before using it. So we would use comfrey tea, and I would make let the leaves basically dissolve over time. After a whole bucket of 20-litre bucket of comfrey full to the brim, after 8 to 12 weeks, all you have left is a handful of debris, and the
Yeah.
rest, the liquid, we strain, and then we use basically on whatever we choose to garden. Basically can dilute it, or if you want to give something a real boost, just put it,
Go straight
just
in.
straight on the plants. So that was
Comfrey's
our
Comfrey's an amazing one, isn't it? It's just one of these kind of, it mines the minerals from so deep. You can use it in as a compress or salves, and all the sort of medicinal properties as well. But then seemingly for the soil, for the fertilization, it's incredible. Am I right in saying that this is more of a ferment, like an anaerobic ferment when you're using the comfrey? Is that the style that you're using?
Yes, we do put a lid on the 20-litre drum, and it just breaks down. It does, you stir it, and it does produce an odour, but not much actually. We do the same for dahlias and nasturtiums. When
Hmm.
Anita was in, we make a
Beautiful.
dahlia tea.
Wow.
And just the jadam thing was, if you're growing tomatoes, make something without a tomato. You're
Yep.
chopping from tomato, so you've got the tea for next year if you can. We haven't mentioned all, right to that end yet, because we're still progressing with using comfrey as the general purpose
Hmm.
tea, but it is. But what I do is, by the time you stir it and then you decant it, we put it through a strainer, and that, the air can, then we take it and then we tip that back into a watering can. By the time you've done 3 or 4 of that, you've started to aerate it
Mm.
anyway, and then you can use it on the garden. So we haven't had an issue with sort of deluging something with anaerobic bacteria, and that all, nothing's ever fallen over or anything like that. So
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's like, I mean, as you say, it's quite complex, but there is a place for all of these different bacteria and organisms and things in that. Are you inoculating this with anything? Like, for example, I just did a big batch of a fermented plant extract where I used lactic acid bacteria, or the EM1, to inoculate to start off the process. And I basically went round the property and found what weed species were growing. First and foremost, I used a whole bunch of other things like comfrey in that. But the reason being was because I wanted to, if that, from what I understand, if that weed is appearing in my property, it's usually there to be doing a job, to mine some minerals, to break apart some compaction, whatever it may be. So I'm then, if it's taken some of those minerals that it's trying to bring back to the soil, I'm taking that weed and I'm basically using the lactic acid bacteria to do that extraction of those nutrients, suspend it in the water, and then I can then use that ferment across the garden to apply those nutrients that it's lacking. So that's kind of what I've done recently. Are you using any of this lactic acid bacteria, EM1, any kind of inoculum for this process, the anaerobic one?
actually, we're not. But one of the things I've just done recently is, to my 200-litre drum, when I make a compost tea and I'm chasing the bacteria, I will add the 20 litres of comfrey tea strained into
Wow.
that as a mix, and then brew the whole lot up. So I have bacteria and the comfrey fertiliser together. Yeah. And in that tea, there are inoculants. I use humic and fulvic acid. There's fish hydrolysate, molasses. And of course, I think I would get that inoculation happening once you've combined those two things together. And that's just something we've had a go at to see, and again, it seems to be effective.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting because you're chasing you're basically experimenting but chasing brewing biology, and you're trying to grow and feed the biology so that you can multiply it to then put it across the property. Um, I'm so interested in all of this. Not sure if you can tell, but the soil health and everything, the like Dr. Elaine Ingham's soil food web, the whole the microscopy that she's brought and made more available to everybody, has really ignited a lot of this stuff for me as well. With with the compost tea, I'd love you to give me a little bit of a differences, if you can, between what a compost tea is and a compost extract, because those words sometimes they do mean different things. And I wonder if you've got a bit of a definition, whether there's something different between the two.
I would, well, a tea, it'd be interesting whether they're interchangeable, those terms. They
Hmm.
most probably wouldn't be. I'm not a scientist or trained, as you know, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
my
no,
general
that's okay.
experience. But making a tea, and I'm brewing it with aeration and things like that. But my main base for that tea is 4 kilograms of compost and worm castings in a bag suspended in the drum.
Yes.
So to make an extract, you would most probably have those same 4 kilograms, and you would somehow allow water to leach through and take out what you do at the bottom. I've never made an extract per se. If you use that sort of method, and I've done the extraction by making the brew
Mm.
to bring out whatever we need. So that's really about my extent of the difference between a tea and an extract.
Yeah, that's okay, because the key point there that you mentioned is that you are basically bubbling away, brewing this tea, and I tend to use that as a bit of a descriptor, saying that a tea is something that we're brewing. We're trying to grow things, or we're trying to multiply things in this tea over a process using this oxygenation and that kind of thing. Whereas an extract is kind of just like almost like what you're doing with the wormweed. When the water goes through it, it's extracting, it's just basically running through the substrate and then it's pulling it out on the other side. So there are different uses for those different ones, but the compost tea seems to, time and time again, just have this incredible reaction for our plants. When you apply it, you can, as you said with the observation, you can see the plants responding, especially if you are using all of these incredible growth promoters, like you've got the fish hydrolysate in there, all of the comfrey and things. It's just a really almost instant result. What have you found? Because you mentioned switching away from all of these organic fertilizers. What's the response been in the garden? What have you seen from starting to use some of these products that you've made yourself?
What what we're doing, this comes back to the measurement and using the refractometer.
Yeah.
We unfortunately, I only came across the bricks meter a few years ago. I would have liked to have done it when we were using the commercial fertilizers as well.
Yeah.
But our guide at the moment, or our comparison, is a supermarket carrot versus what one out of our garden, and we will
Yes.
get a bricks reading of 1 at the supermarket, and we
Really.
can get a bricks reading of 6 or 9, and that is, I understand, the reading if you can get up to 12 or 14, you're at the real high end.
Mm.
But you notice the quality and the sweetness of the fruit. So when we're noticing it in the bricks readings, we don't end up with best in show looking plants or the tallest tomato plants or things like that, but it's the nutritional value of the fruit that
Mm.
we're really, and we gauge that with the refractometer. And everything we grow, when you compare it to what you've just taken out of the supermarket, it is chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
And just we know, and we grow enough. We might put an extra zucchini plant in, but that's when you've got 36 acres. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
We've easily grow enough food ourselves using
Probably, I
what we're
think
doing now.
we grow probably we grow all our summer veg. So we're sort of self-sufficient in summer veg, I think, for about 3 months. And of course,
Goodness.
then we, like a lot of people, we go through the hungry gap. But of course, we like to travel as well, Jordan. So we just sort of get to a stage and we go, that's it, we'll call it quits and
Yeah.
put the beds to bed,
Yeah.
basically cover them over, tuck them in for the winter and do
Hmm.
all of that. But getting back to another thing that we found, as you said, this is all an experiment. Here we are now, this year, white butterfly. We've hardly had any white butterfly in the garden. Now, 3 years ago, the place would be swarming with it.
Mm.
So hardly any white butterfly this year. We've hardly got any aphid problem in the
Perfect.
greenhouse because greenhouses are notorious for breeding up all sorts of things. And another thing, the harlequin beetle.
Oh,
We've had harlequin beetle thick with it in flowers and things years before. Now, this year, we haven't got it. And so that's the other thing. It's not only how much we're producing and the bricks levels rising. I mean, with all of that comes these wonderful plants and wonderful healthy plants and not being infested by bugs. Yeah.
yeah. Well done. I think that's exactly it because you're starting to see the result of everything working well underneath the soil. And especially with pest and disease, like I talk about some of the work of Dr. Phil Callahan, where he talks about this infrared release from the plants, whereby an unhealthy sick plant will give off a signal that it's to be decomposed. And as our insects are coming in, their role is to come and take out the weak and the sick plants. So when you're seeing zero bug damage, it means that your plants are radiating health from the ground up, literally. And the the biology is able to strengthen those cell walls, like the calcium, the silica content that's in there that really buffers that cell wall, which is really strong. Then you're not getting the ability for these aphids to come in and start attacking the plants. There's no need for them to be there. Yes, you might get a few here and there, and it all balances itself out. But these populations are not going to be soaring in the same way because you've got resilient plants that are, built to do this. And really interesting on my YouTube over the last 18 months, nearly 2 years, I've been running this experiment with cayenne pepper chilies where I have started with a really basic potting mix that's completely sterile from the garden center, and I've been using different methods on these ones. First and foremost, using a really sort of chemical uh water soluble NPK fertilizer. I've been using organic amendments, one of the products that I've created in a second one, and then the third one using the organic amendments, but also using extracts, compost teas, things like this as well. The difference is just unbelievable in comparison to bug damage, to resilience to the weather, the ability to nutrient cycle, the size of the plants, the size of the produce, but also what you touched on with the bricks. the flavor, the translation of nutrient density is just night and day. And that's
Mm,
Yeah.
when
mm,
it really hits home, doesn't it? Because that's the produce that we're eating, we're fueling ourselves with. And going from that carrot that you pulled from the supermarket versus what you've just pulled from your garden, it's going to be night and day in the expression of our health as well. Um, so obviously now with people all coming into your gardens and doing these workshops and things and teaching about all of this stuff, what are some of the things that really are unlocking for people? What's the joy that you get in helping people realize some of these things and some of the, aha moments that people are getting? Is it more around helping them understand that soil rather than plants, maybe?
I, yes, I think that understanding the soil. Um, One of the joys is when I go and do a talk, and it's a 20-minute talk while we have an open garden, and it goes over an hour because
Yeah.
people just keep asking questions. That's a real buzz. You
yeah.
know that people are interested, and not just one person, somebody will lead to somebody else. And then they want to know some more detail about how do you get this good compost, or what does your
Mm.
like when you and you can go down all sorts of rabbit holes. That's a real buzz. And the other thing is because it is so complex, the biology and things, and we're still learning about it. Some of
Mm.
this is only in the last 10 years. These discoveries about how soil health all really links, and the chap that you just mentioned as well. All the research is still coming. I try and keep it really simple,
Mm.
so I give those people those three mantras, and people can generally remember three things if and keep them very simple, and then just go from there. And that comfrey tea in the 20-litre bucket, that's sort of a take home and something
Yeah.
you can go home, and if you've got comfrey, or if you don't, if you want to use nasturtiums or anything else, you can still go and make a some sort of product
Mm.
at your home, and then move on to the other things. So
It gives them a
it's
practical take home, doesn't it?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we just like sharing what we've learned along the way,
Mm.
Jordan. It's
Yeah.
just as simple as that. We get a buzz out of just, as Paul said about the comfrey tea. I did a little video the other day on Instagram making a jade preparation with the dahlias, and I got a couple of messages back from people saying, I did it, Anita. I went and I pruned, all the old frazzled
Yeah.
blooms, and I've got it all set away, tucked away
Oh,
for my
great.
fertilizer for for 12 months' time. So those little things, when you can just, as Paul said, is taking away the small things that are achievable at home. Comfrey tea, starting a wee worm farm, or a little composting system, and we just getting a real buzz out of just doing it.
I definitely relate to that because it's just seeing something light up in the other person and seeing them unlock something where they can go and do better in their gardening journey and then help somebody else and the ripple spreads outwards is really, really nice. Um,
Those
j-
those little children looking through your front fence,
Yeah,
when they see them, they end up sampling something. Maybe it'll put a spark in them later on.
yeah,
you're absolutely right. I think that is what it's all about. Even for, my little boy, he's nearly 8 months old. He's starting to explore the garden and really that's unlocking a whole nother level of meaning and joy for me out there as well, which is really nice. And you're right. Hopefully it sparks the seed and, starts to build that within him and then spreading after that. Um, just before I forget, I want to touch on that one of the last mantras that you said, which was keep the soil covered all of the time. Um, Talk to me about what you would suggest in that instance for people, whether because we've got a couple of different, I guess, techniques in this, but then also one where you're staying in the garden, you're working in the garden, what are you doing to cover it? And then also when you're going away, when you're traveling and you want to sort of, as you said, tuck them up for the winter, what are your process in keeping it covered?
I think the best approach would be to grow, like taking vegetables first. You've finished your vegetable, your plot is empty there. Uh, Grow a grass, particularly lucerne. Lucerne is
Yes.
particularly beneficial. I think it's protozoa that
Hmm.
are very beneficial. So chop and drop a lucerne crop into your garden. You've got the roots that go down a long way. That would be the ultimate. The second thing is if you can't cover with a living plant cover, then I would be looking at a mulch.
Hmm.
Now, a mulch for us, we use two. One, we have lucerne hay
Hmm.
that we use. We could use straw as well. It's not as expensive, or wood chip. Wood chip and lucerne together is a very good combination as well. And just layer that on things like do that in our flower beds when you've chopped and you just want the perennials to come back. We will cover the soil with those. And then the third one is, if you have enough, is a compost.
Hmm.
But we never can make enough compost to be that generous with it. We will make our compost and put it right around the plants as we consume it and eat it. Particularly vegetable garden is it's a
Hmm.
big consumer of or organic matter. So they're our sort of, well, two main ways of covering, so that you give the soil that protection. And we get enough rainfall in winter here in West Gippsland that the soil remains damp, and
Sure.
there's activity and life underneath that mulch ready to go again in the spring.
Yeah, you definitely need that moisture in there. But that's a really good point, especially the lucerne. I think that one's underrated. Too many people are just overlooking that one. And even just like you said, growing it as a living mulch, I think is so magic.
Mm.
I developed early on a multi-species cover crop blend, which essentially I use in my beds in between things, generally over the winter because it has a lot of clover. So I can grow these things up and I can use some of them as an understory or in and around main crop plants as living mulch because it has those living roots. The ability for the plants to cool the soil when you've got beating sun, especially in our Brisbane summers. We've got it's just cooking the soil and the moisture is going. I'm having to water, twice a day sometimes if there is not plants on there. But if there's plants and living roots, the ability for it to get that heat off the soil is just incredible. Um, so that's really interesting. And then your compost. I wonder if we can just touch quickly on your composting. Um, what is it that you've learnt about composting that's changed the game for you? And maybe a little bit on your process as to, I mean, obviously you share this, so it's not necessarily a secret, but what's your composting process?
The Well, as I should say, the one line I use in my talks is there's six things you need to know about good compost, and you only have to remember one of them after you make your first batch.
Okay.
So you need air, water, size, temperature, and you need a carbon nitrogen ratio,
Hmm.
the green to brown. And the big one and the gorilla in the room is time, because
Yeah.
you'll compost anything if you give it enough time. But our main secret is I bought a chipper when I retired, and I really reduce and increase the surface area of all our garden things that we go through. It is a chipper, but I use it as a shredder and a mulcher as well.
Mm.
And nearly everything we have in the garden goes through that chipper. And then we have lawn clippings and cow manure from our neighbours.
Yeah.
And then I will sprinkle with handfuls of rock dust.
Mm.
Um, we've just got they're our main and maybe a handful of wood ash as well from the eucalypt
Right.
forest as and mix it up a bit like a lasagna. So we have
Perfect.
sheets of the grass is the lasagna sheet, and the meat sauce or the vegetarian sauce is the stuff that goes through the chippers,
Mm.
and we just regularly do that, and about 10 to 12 weeks, and we will have compost that is ready, that smells rich
Mm.
and dark brown or black, and smells sweet, and it's just friable and crumbly, and you can use it straight on the garden. And
Beautiful.
that's really the secret. The secret with the brown and the green is there's all sorts of things, and there's a whole sort of thing that ratio is by weight, and nobody
Mm.
has a set of scales next to a compost heap,
No.
and it's dry weight. There's even less chance of something with an oven.
Yeah.
So it's very important. So you have to come back, well, how do you do this in your backyard? So it becomes a volume thing. And then
Mm.
you hear people mention a bucket of this and 2 buckets of that sort of thing. So
Yep.
grass is an ideal general purpose starter for compost. It has a carbon nitrogen of 30 right where you want it.
Perfect.
Your kitchen scraps, your peelings, it's about 20 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got sawdust that's dry, it's about 500 to 1.
Yeah.
So you don't need much sawdust to put on. And it's just trial and error till you get that mix right. And the other thing, again, with temperature and time, if you can get our compost bins are a cubic metre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because we use the chipper, the volume shrinks tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
We can get half a cubic metre of material, and we can get it. Your ideal temperatures are between 55 to 65 to kill the
Mm-hmm.
pathogens. I've just checked this morning, and ours is up to 70. It's not a
Yeah,
race to
right.
the highest temperature.
Yeah.
It's just really reacted quickly,
Beautiful.
and we'll only turn it 4 times in that 12 weeks.
Okay,
So
interesting.
you can make faster compost, and I have tried, but you have to be very fit and do lots of turning to get the air into it.
Yeah.
And on the way through, when you turn it, you might come across a bit of dry grass or something like that. A 9 litre watering can is about all we use in a cubic metre of compost just to dampen things down, and then set it on its way when you're turning it. And
Beautiful.
that's really the our sort of idea of our approach to compost, and it just seems to work very well for us.
It sounds
We
like it
get
is.
Really good results.
Yeah, yeah. And you're just simplifying it. I like that, Paul. You've just taken the knowledge of what the complexity of how the many different ways that you can go, and you're just simplifying it so that if you get those basic steps right, everything else sort of you're just well more in the ballpark of getting things in where you want them. And then it's about that observation, the tinkering, and the sort of observing, oh, there's some dry pockets here, or maybe I use too much water, it's starting to go anaerobic, all of these types of things. Um, the time one is so crucial though, because especially on, YouTube and social media, we're seeing these get amazing compost in 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it's like, is it amazing compost? I think the timing, like, yes, you probably got to be really fit. You're gonna have a sore back by the end of the 3 weeks, and you probably haven't been.
yes.
You got to constantly be doing that to be making as much for your garden that you need. But it's like, I think the time allowing the biology to do what it does, to break it down, to build the populations within this compost, I think is also really, really important. So I love that you've put time in there as a bit of a caveat to an ingredient. Um, look, lastly, last little question for you both. What's what's interesting to you at the moment? What are we thinking about between the two of you as to where the next year or so unfolds? Because there's always something I feel like we're always either, tinkering or sort of interested in something new or want to grow something or experiment with something. Where does the interest and the passion lie for you currently where we are today?
I know for myself, it will be on the chemistry side of that. I think I've got the biology, as best as I can do it, and brew it up and whatnot. And it's just bringing in sources of because you don't once the biology's there, you don't need much NPK to get
Hmm.
things to grow.
Yeah.
It's getting natural sources of that. So it's I discovered only recently that the NPK of Comfrey, I think, is 0.51, 1.5, and just enough with the biology to kick it away. So
Mhm.
looking at natural sources of, we don't have chooks here. What means we don't have chook pen scrapings to add into the compost.
Mhm.
So it's a case of what plants or where can I get that source from? So that's my
Mm.
sort of direction in the next year or so.
I think for me, it's always just, applying Paul's latest brew, and sort of, yeah, just, where are we going to target this particular brew, and just observing, what happens, a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks after we've done something. And with us
Mm.
now, it's a matter of, now what did we do and what was in that brew, and it just remembering what we were doing. But I think it's just an experiment and having fun with it.
Mhm.
We just, and another thing too is we're meeting like-minded people as well, like yourself there, Jordan, and just, yeah, just getting together and talk. We had a wonderful nerdy afternoon here a couple of weeks ago with some friends who specialize in rare plants, and they brought their microscope over and we had our
That's
microscope out, and
amazing.
we were just looking at each other's brews and things. So that sort of thing, having a lot of fun with that and using the brews and seeing what it does for the garden, and yeah, and taking it from there.
There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again so much to the both of them. They are wonderful people. They are very connected with what they're doing. And I think the transparency in sharing and learning and growing and just giving all of this, sharing the joy, as we spoke about there at the end, just being able to see it light up in somebody else is something that I relate to so much. So please go and check them out if you haven't heard of them before or this is your first experience. The links, as always, are in the description and the show notes. So you can go and follow them, follow the journey, connect with them. If you're in West Gippsland, make sure you go out there and see the garden. I would absolutely love to if I'm ever in the area. But please support this episode as well. If you found some value from it, if you enjoyed it, share it around. I would greatly appreciate that. It would be wonderful to help more people connect with this show. But that's it for another week. I'm so excited to see you again next week. These are rolling through with some incredible, incredible guests. I'm so lucky to do what I do. And you are the listeners that make this all possible. So thank you again. Take care and bye for now.